Imagine this. You go to sleep one night, the world outside embroiled in the greatest conflict humanity has ever known, yet your small corner carries on. Familiar, tangible. Then you wake, or perhaps years later you look at a map, or stumble upon a faded photograph, and discover that a place you knew, or perhaps a place history simply recorded, is utterly gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned, but erased. What if I told you that during the tumultuous years of the Second World War, amidst the clash of empires and ideologies, an entire town, complete with its people, its buildings, its very presence on the earth, vanished overnight? This isn't the plot of a fantastical novel. It's the haunting echo of an enigma known as the town that vanished overnight, a mystery that decades later, no one has fully explained. Welcome, seekers of the unknown, to our channel. We journey into the shadows of history, exploring tales that defy easy answers, stories that linger long after the textbooks are closed. Today, we embark on one of the most perplexing journeys yet, into the heart of a disappearance so absolute it challenges our understanding of what's possible, especially under the fog of war. Stay with us until the very end, because the threads we pull together might reveal something truly startling about the secrets buried by time and conflict. Before we delve into the chilling details of this baffling event, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. Your support fuels our explorations into the unexplained. And share this video with anyone fascinated by history's hidden enigmas. They won't want to miss this. What you are about to hear compels us to question everything we think we know about that era. The year is 1943. The world is ablaze. From the frozen steppes of Russia to the dense jungles of the Pacific, humanity is locked in a brutal struggle. Yet far from the epicenters of famous battles, nestled somewhere in the complex tapestry of war-torn Europe, its exact location deliberately obscured in initial reports, adding layers to the mystery, lay the small, unassuming town known, for the sake of our chronicle, as Oakhaven. Oakhaven wasn't strategically vital in the grand calculus of war planners. It possessed no major industrial facilities, no critical railway junctions, no significant military garrison. It was, by all accounts recorded before its disappearance, remarkably ordinary. A cluster of stone and timber houses, a centuries-old church spire piercing the skyline, cobblestone streets echoing with the passage of horse-drawn carts and the occasional sputtering motor vehicle. Perhaps a few hundred souls called it home, farmers, artisans, shopkeepers, families living lives dictated by seasons and local concerns, albeit under the long, omnipresent shadow of the global conflict. Rationing was a reality. News from the fronts arrived sporadically, carried by crackling radios or delayed newspapers, and the undercurrent of fear was palpable. Young men were away, fighting on distant shores, or perhaps already lost, their absence a constant ache in the community's heart. Yet life persisted. Children played in the town square, albeit more hushed than before. Neighbors shared what little they had. The rhythms of existence, though strained, continued. Smoke curled from chimneys. Light spilled from windows in the evenings. Markets saw hushed bartering, and the church bell marked the hours, familiar, grounding sound in uncertain times. Think of the resilience of the human spirit, carrying on with daily rituals, even as the world map was being violently redrawn. Oakhaven was a microcosm of that quiet endurance, a place seemingly insulated by its own insignificance from the war's most savage blows. Its inhabitants likely feared bombings from unseen aircraft or the arrival of weary, occupying soldiers, the common anxieties of the era. They could never have conceived of annihilation in the form they were about to face. There were no large-scale troop movements reported nearby in the days leading up to its vanishing. No unusual seismic activity was recorded. No intelligence intercepts hinted at a targeted military operation of unprecedented secrecy and totality against such a minor settlement. According to the fragmented accounts pieced together later, the night Oakhaven disappeared was unremarkable. Perhaps a sliver of moon hung in the sky, or maybe clouds obscured the stars. Was there rain? A sudden fog rolling in from the nearby hills? These details are lost, or perhaps were never noted, deemed unimportant until they became the only backdrop to an impossible event. One day, Oakhaven was there, a point on military maps, a name in administrative records, a home to hundreds. The next morning it wasn't. The initial discovery wasn't immediate, highlighting the chaos and fractured communication lines of the war. It wasn't like a neighboring village noticed its absence at sunrise. It might have been days, perhaps even a week or more later, when routine patrols, supply convoys, or perhaps even resistance fighters attempted to pass through or make contact. What they found, or rather, didn't find, was the beginning of the Enigma. The landscape itself seemed altered, subtly wrong. Where streets and buildings should have stood, there was something else. Or perhaps, disturbingly, nothing else. Just the terrain, eerily silent, unnaturally undisturbed, or perhaps disturbed in a way that defied conventional explanation. The air hung heavy, not with the acrid smell of explosives or burnt timber, but with an unnerving stillness, an absence that felt fundamentally wrong. This wasn't the familiar, tragic landscape of a bombed-out town. This was something different, something inexplicable. The stage was set for a mystery that would only deepen as the first stunned observers tried to comprehend the incomprehensible sight before them. What could possibly make a town vanish? The first scouts or soldiers to reach the location where Oakhaven should have been were gripped by a profound sense of disorientation. Imagine their maps, meticulously drafted, showing roads leading into a town, houses clustered around a square, the familiar symbol for a church. Now imagine standing at the supposed entry point, map in hand, confronted only by rolling fields, or perhaps a dense patch of woods that seemed unnaturally old, or even stranger, barren ground that looked untouched for decades. The roads themselves might have abruptly ended, petering out into nothingness, or perhaps they seemed to reroute around the empty space, as if conforming to a newly altered reality. There were no ruins, no charred skeletons of buildings, no craters filled with rubble, no scattered remnants of life violently interrupted. The typical, tragic signature of warfare was conspicuously absent. This lack of destruction was, paradoxically, more terrifying than any battlefield devastation. Destruction implies an act of force, something that leaves evidence. Oakhaven's site suggested subtraction, a clean, impossible removal. Initial reports sent back up the chain of command were likely met with disbelief, accusations of incompetence, drunkenness, or desertion. Check your maps. Check your coordinates. Towns don't simply disappear. But subsequent patrols confirmed the impossible. Oakhaven was gone. Military engineers and surveyors were dispatched under strict orders of secrecy. Their task was not one of reconstruction, but of understanding the void. They took soil samples, measured atmospheric conditions, searched for any residual energy signatures, radiation, or chemical traces that might hint at an unknown weapon or event. The results were baffling, yielding nothing conclusive, nothing that pointed towards any known terrestrial explanation. They found the faint outlines where foundations should have been, almost like photographic negatives on Earth. But the materials themselves, the stone, the wood, the lives, were absent. How do you investigate something that simply ceased to be? Where do you even begin when the crime scene itself is missing? The few civilians in adjacent areas who were cautiously questioned offered little help. Some spoke of an unusually quiet night, an oppressive silence that fell sometime after midnight. Others recalled strange, fleeting lights in the sky. But descriptions varied wildly, colors ranging from deep blue to blinding white, shapes described as orbs, beams, or shimmering curtains. In the context of war, with frequent aircraft sightings and the psychological stress of conflict, such accounts were easily dismissed as unreliable, products of fear and imagination. Crucially, no one reported sounds consistent with a massive struggle, an evacuation, or widespread destruction. No screams, no explosions, no rumbling of heavy machinery. The disappearance happened in unnerving silence. The official military response was predictable: containment and classification. Whatever happened at Oakhaven was deemed too sensitive, too inexplicable, or perhaps too potentially advantageous if it was a weapon. to be publicly acknowledged. The area was likely cordoned off, declared a restricted zone under vague pretenses: unexploded ordnance, epidemic outbreak, sensitive training area. Records pertaining to Oakhaven, census data, administrative files, even older maps began to quietly disappear from archives or were heavily redacted. A curtain of silence descended, enforced by the harsh realities of wartime authority. Yet whispers persisted. Soldiers who had been part of the initial discovery teams, sworn to secrecy, sometimes spoke in hushed tones years later, haunted by the sheer impossibility of what they had witnessed. Fragmented stories emerged of unsettling findings. During those first secret surveys, a single child's doll found miles away in a pristine forest clearing, untouched by weather. Strange, localized magnetic anomalies that caused compasses to spin uselessly within the town's former boundaries. Reports of chronometers malfunctioning, losing or gaining time inexplicably when passing through the specific area. These weren't proofs, but they added layers to the deepening dread and mystery. Conventional explanations were systematically ruled out. A synchronized, overnight evacuation of hundreds of people, carrying all their belongings, leaving no trace, in complete silence. Without any official orders? Impossible. A sudden, localized natural disaster, a sinkhole swallowing the town whole, a flash flood of unimaginable force? The geology didn't support it, and the lack of any geological disturbance or water evidence at the site itself rendered these theories void. An experimental weapon? This became a more persistent, if terrifying, possibility. Both Axis and Allied powers were racing to develop new, devastating technologies. Could Oakhaven have been an accidental or deliberate test site for something truly paradigm-shifting? A weapon that didn't just destroy, but unmade? The implications were staggering. But again, the lack of residual energy or expected byproducts was confounding. The mystery deepened, refusing to yield to conventional investigation. It became a classified file, a footnote in suppressed reports, a ghost story whispered among veterans. But the absence remained, a scar on the landscape and a haunting question mark in the annals of a war already filled with unimaginable horrors. What force could achieve such silent, total erasure? If you've made it this far, comment below with what you think could erase a town without a trace. Hashtag vanished on mystery. What truly happened remained veiled, waiting for a new clue, a new perspective, perhaps decades later, to shed light on the impossible night Oakhaven was wiped from the face of the earth. Years bled into decades. The Second World War, a fire that had consumed the globe, eventually burned itself out, leaving behind scars, ashes, and reconstructed nations. Borders shifted, ideologies realigned, and the world entered a new era of uneasy peace and Cold War. In the vast administrative cleanup and the sheer volume of wartime secrets, the file on Oakhaven gathered dust, buried under layers of classification, known only to a dwindling few who chose, or were ordered, to forget. The physical location where the town once stood likely returned to nature, or perhaps remained a quietly restricted military zone, its purpose obscured by time and bureaucracy. The immediate, visceral shock of the disappearance faded from active memory, relegated to the realm of wartime rumor and fragmented, unreliable anecdotes, the kind of story whispered late at night, easily dismissed as battlefield nerves or exaggerated folklore. Independent researchers, journalists, or historians occasionally stumbled upon vague references to the incident in post-war memoirs or peripherally related documents. Driven by curiosity, they might file information requests, only to be met with polite but firm denials, heavily redacted papers citing national security exemptions decades after the war, or simply complete silence. The official narrative, if one could even call it that, was that no such event ever occurred, or that records were lost in the chaos of war. A convenient, impenetrable bureaucratic wall. The enigma of Oakhaven seemed destined to remain just that, an unsolved, unacknowledged footnote in a history already overflowing with tragedy and secrets. Until the turn of the century, the catalyst for reopening the coldest of cases arrived unexpectedly, not through official channels, but from the brittle pages of a personal diary. discovered in a dusty attic trunk in a distant city, belonging to a recently deceased elderly woman who had been a young nurse peripherally attached to a military intelligence unit during the war. The diary contained short series of entries that reignited the mystery. These entries, written in hasty, sometimes fearful script, didn't come from Oakhaven itself, but from someone processing classified field reports she wasn't supposed to see. She mentioned Oakhaven by a code name, referencing preliminary findings from the survey teams. Most chillingly, she described reports of localized, inexplicable temporal anomalies, watches stopping, then restarting, film footage capturing subtle distortions inconsistent with camera malfunction. But one entry stood out, cryptic and terrifying. It spoke of non-terrestrial debris and impossible geometry found at the epicenter, quickly suppressed and removed by a specialized unit operating outside the normal military command structure. The diary entry ended abruptly, followed by pages filled with mundane observations, as if the writer dared not revisit the topic. Simultaneously, or perhaps spurred on by the quiet leak of the diary's contents into niche research communities online, another piece surfaced. A low-level physicist, working on historical atmospheric data analysis, detected a highly unusual, concentrated energy signature spike in the exact region of Oakhaven, correlating precisely with the estimated time frame of its disappearance in 1943. The signature didn't match any known natural phenomena, like lightning or meteor impacts, nor did it align with the energy profiles of conventional explosives or even early atomic tests conducted elsewhere years later. It was unique, powerful, and incredibly brief, a burst of unknown energy unlike anything recorded before or since. This wasn't rumor anymore. It was data, tangible if baffling evidence. These two threads, the personal account hinting at inexplicable findings and cover-ups, and the scientific data pointing to an anomalous energy event, began to weave a new narrative. The focus shifted away from purely military explanations. Could Oakhaven have been subjected to something far beyond even the most secret wartime weapons programs? When faced with evidence that defies known science or history, how far should we be willing to push the boundaries of possibility? Suddenly, fringe theories that had been whispered for decades gained a disturbing new plausibility. Ideas involving dimensional rifts, accidental consequences of theoretical physics experiments far exceeding anything publicly known at the time, or even contact or conflict with forces utterly alien to human understanding. The term impossible geometry from the nurse's diary resonated deeply with those familiar with theoretical physics and speculative science, hinting at concepts related to spatial manipulation or higher dimensions. Could the town and its inhabitants have been shifted, transferred, or disintegrated at a fundamental level by forces beyond comprehension? A small, dedicated group of independent researchers, a historian specializing in classified wartime operations, the physicist who found the energy signature, and a forensic analyst skilled in deciphering old documents, began to pool their resources, operating outside mainstream academia and governmental oversight. They revisited old maps, cross-referenced the nurse's diary with other declassified, though heavily censored, wartime communications, and even attempted, using modern remote sensing technology, to survey the Oakhaven site from afar, looking for residual anomalies suggested by the decades-old energy spike. The pieces were starting to form a picture, one more incredible and terrifying than anyone dared to imagine. What they were closing in on was not just the fate of a town, but perhaps a secret about reality itself. A secret someone went to extraordinary lengths to bury. The final layer of the enigma was about to be peeled back. The breakthrough came not from a dusty archive or a high-tech scan, but from piecing together the disparate, seemingly unrelated clues in a new light. The physicist modeling the unique energy signature found it bore a frightening resemblance to theoretical models of localized space-time warping, concepts considered purely science fiction in 1943, but explored intensely in classified, leading-edge physics circles decades later. The historian, cross-referencing personnel lists from obscure wartime projects, found overlaps between individuals involved in early radar stealth experiments and the names associated with the specialized unit that sanitized the Oakhaven site. The forensic analyst, applying advanced imaging techniques to the digital copies of the nurse's diary, discovered faint chemical traces on the page mentioning impossible geometry, residues consistent with materials subjected to intense electromagnetic fields far exceeding any known conventional power source of the era. There was no single smoking gun, but rather a convergence of evidence pointing towards a terrifying hypothesis. Oakhaven wasn't attacked or destroyed by any conventional weapon. It was subjected to, or perhaps accidentally caught within, an experiment of unimaginable power and consequence, an attempt to manipulate the very fabric of reality. Driven by this hypothesis, the team focused on a specific, highly classified Allied wartime project, rumored in conspiracy circles, but never confirmed, aiming not just for radar invisibility, but for something far more radical: temporary spatial displacement. Could Oakhaven have been the unintended collateral damage of a field test gone catastrophically wrong? Or perhaps, even more chillingly, the intended target for a proof of concept of a technology that could make enemy assets simply cease to exist? The final piece clicked into place when they managed to track down the elderly son of one of the scientists peripherally linked to that project. Bound by his father's dying oath of secrecy for decades, he finally shared fragments of his father's anguished, guilt-ridden confessions. Talk of a containment field failure, an energy cascade beyond control, and a targeted location, described only by coordinates that perfectly matched Oakhaven's, being subjected to a phase shift from which it never returned. The impossible geometry and non-terrestrial debris weren't alien. They were likely fragments of the experimental apparatus itself, exhibiting strange properties after exposure to forces they barely understood, hastily removed to hide the truth. The climax wasn't a confrontation in a hidden bunker, but the cold, horrifying realization in the researchers' makeshift office. Oakhaven and its people hadn't been bombed, evacuated, or swallowed by the earth. They were likely instantaneously displaced from our dimension, shifted into an unknown state or location, or perhaps disintegrated into pure energy by the uncontrolled collapse of the experimental field. The silence, the lack of debris, the clean removal, it all made a terrifying kind of sense. There was nothing left because the town, and everything within it, had been fundamentally removed from our physical plane. The energy signature was the fleeting, violent scar left on space-time itself. The fate of the inhabitants, utterly unknown. Were they obliterated instantly? Or do they exist, frozen or adrift, in some dimension parallel to ours, forever separated from the world they knew? We can only speculate, and perhaps it is merciful that we do not know for sure. The disappearance of Oakhaven wasn't an act of conventional warfare, nor a supernatural event in the traditional sense. It was likely the result of human hubris, a terrifying glimpse into the potential consequences of wielding technologies beyond our comprehension or control, especially under the desperate pressures of total war. The secret was kept not just to hide a military failure or a forbidden weapon, but perhaps to bury the evidence of a power that fundamentally challenged our understanding of existence itself. A power that, if revealed, could change everything. What happened at Oakhaven serves as a chilling reminder that beneath the documented battles and known history of the Second World War, other, stranger conflicts may have unfolded, hidden in the shadows. It speaks to the hundreds of souls who were not casualties of bombs or bullets, but victims of an unprecedented, silent erasure, their fate an enduring enigma. It compels us to consider what other secrets might lie buried in classified files or beneath landscapes that look ordinary but hold extraordinary pasts. The truth, as Oakhaven demonstrates, is often far stranger and sometimes far more terrifying than fiction. The world is full of hidden stories and deep enigmas like Oakhaven. If you believe that history holds more secrets than we're told, secrets that challenge the very nature of our reality, then subscribe to our channel. Join us in the quest for understanding. Share your thoughts on this incredible story in the comments below, and let's continue to lift the veils together. There are more mysteries waiting.